Hi, I'm going to show you how to mix the bread and work with the starter the sourdough starter. Okay, so to start off with, this is what I put my sourdough starter in. Now you see it's see all the bubbles in there? Okay, that's what you want. So what I do is I put 75 grams, I weigh everything with my little scale, right? That's what you got to do. So I put 75 grams of my sourdough starter in this jar, and then I add 75 grams of room temperature water, and that water should be dechlorinated, so we can leave it sit out for overnight, like if it was in your kettle or something like that. So it should be dechlorinated anyways. That way it doesn't mess with the starter, the activity, the life in the starter. The chlorine may kill that. Okay, so 75 grams of starter in the jar, then you add 75 grams of room temperature water, and then 75 grams of flour. Now what I use is this rye flour. Oh, maybe it's backwards on the screen there, I don't know. Looks backwards to me. Anyways, it's Anita's rye flour. And I like to use rye flour because it gives a nice robust flavor for the sourdough. It does make the sourdough brown, right? So if you're making white bread, maybe you want to use white flour. But the rye flour is very robust, and it makes a very strong sourdough. When I mean strong, I don't mean flavor. I mean that it's very robust. It'll last a lot, and not just go weak after a while. I keep this in the fridge, and I can keep it in the fridge for like weeks, and then I take it out, I warm it up, and keep it in a big jar like this, and I just warm it up, and then I take some out, and then I start it, I feed it, and like I don't feed it every day like some people do. I just feed it when I need it. Okay, so I got the 75 grams of starter, 75 grams of water, and 75 grams of flour in here. Okay, then I put what he usually does is he fills up the jar. This is a 500 milliliter jar, right? And it fills up the jar about halfway. So I put a rubber band there, and then let it sit in my kitchen where it's warm. The warmer it is out, the faster this will rise, but or come active. And yeah, so it depends how warm it is. In the wintertime it might take longer. So I usually let it sit for about 3 hours. 3 hours. So this has been sitting for 3 hours. And so at the top of the starter was where this rubber band was. And then after 3 hours, it fills up the whole jar, you see? Like that. So you want to make sure you have a big enough jar, about half the size of or twice the size of what the starter that you have in here, okay? Because it's going to expand, right? So anyways, the recipe I'm sending you is for one good loaf of bread, the one I use anyways. And so you want a real active starter. You see all the bubbles in there? It just looks like beautiful, eh? And that's what you want. What'll happen after 3 or 4 hours, that's where it's at its peak, and then what'll happen, as food diminishes, it consumes the flour and the water, and it'll start going down. So that's not what you want. When it starts going down, that's too late. You want it when it's at its peak, so when it's most bubbly. Okay, so that's the start. Okay, so I have my scale here. I've tart it so it's on 0. I'm going to add 150 grams of starter, active starter. Here, 150 grams or so. And then I need 300 grams of water. This is for 1 loaf. So this is just room temperature water. It's not boiling water or anything. I just took it out of the kettle. And okay, stir it up. Just dissolve the sourdough in there in the water. Sorry, making a lot of noise. Now we're adding flour. So we're going to add 450 grams of flour. So I like to use about 150 grams of rye flour. On this bread, I'm making a light rye bread. And adding everything up here. So it's 600. Yeah, good. And that's my rye flour. And then I add 300 grams of white flour. So I'm using Rogers bread flour. It's unbleached flour. It's a good bread for. It's good bread flour. I really recommend it. It's high in gluten. So it has it's very what they call a really strong flour. So what you're looking for is a flour with a lot of gluten. So what that does is the gluten gives structure to the bread. It makes when they say stronger, it's what makes the bread stand up more. Otherwise, it just flattens out. So when you start working it, it'll make a bowl, like a ball, and it forms a ball more easily and stays firm, I guess. All right, so I've got all my flour and starter and water in here now, and I'm just going to add some salt. So I do that in a little separate container so I don't screw up. And that way I don't forget. Stir it again. So I just I like to put about 10 grams of salt. Not too much. I don't like it too salty. Okey-doke. So if you got a mixer with some bread dough hooks in it, the dough hook in it, that'll work really well. Like I got this real inexpensive one. It works okay, you know. And you know, if you got a good one, use it. It'll save you some work. What I do is I stretch it, hand stretch it. Some people just use the mixer to knead their dough, but I like hand stretching it. I kind of get a good idea what for the feel of the bread and how much strength it's got. You know. Anyways, those kind of things you're going to have to learn with experience. Okay, so I've got it in the blender. So it started on the low speed, and yeah. What I do is I just wet. You know, if you keep all your tools wet and your hands wet, it'll and prevent it from sticking to you more. But yeah. So it doesn't take long. It just mix up the dough till it turns into kind of like a big hairy mess. Some people describe it that way. But just make sure all the ingredients are well incorporated into the dough. Okay. That's good. And the dough kind of just falls off the utensils. Kind of sticks together. Anyways, I'll just flip the camera here and show you what it looks like. That's what the dough looks like. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this with a damp towel and let it sit for about 20 minutes. And then I'm going to take it out and I'm going to stretch it. That's just, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay? Okay, so the dough's been sitting for about 20 minutes. And I've got this scraper that's a pretty handy plastic scraper. You can pull it out, and I wet it with some water so your hands and tools, if you keep them wet, like spoons or whatever, everything just falls out of the bowl just and doesn't stick to the thing if it's wet. So your hands should be wet too. Now this is the stretching stage. What I do here, I'll just move the camera a bit so you can see. So what I do is I just grab it like this, and then I do this on a dry counter, so you pull it right like that, and so what you're doing is just building the strength and the gluten. You don't want to tear it, so you're just stretching it, and see how I just leave it stick to the counter and pull, but don't tear. And the more you do this, the more harder it gets to stretch it. You know, it starts getting stronger. That's what we refer to as flour that has strong. We have strong flour. We'll give you a nice bowl like this. See how it just stands out by itself like that? Okay, it's just forming into a ball, and we drop it back into the bowl, or whatever you got to store your dough. So the dough on your fingers will stick to the ball if you just sort of pat it. All right, now I cover it with a towel again, damp towel, and let it sit for another 20 minutes. Okay, and we'll come back and stretch it again.